Hello, Confirmation 1 class, and welcome to the lesson on the growth of the New Apostolic Church, Part 2. You are going to learn about the conditions under which the New Apostolic Church spread in the beginning. From Hamburg, Germany, the New Apostolic Church spread to the Netherlands, and from there to Java, Indonesia, Chicago, New York, that's in the USA. So between 1884 and 1914, new apostolic people, mostly from Germany and Switzerland, immigrated to Australia and South America. Congregations were established in Australia, North and South America, as well as South Africa. For the purpose of this lesson, we are going to focus on how the church was established in South Africa. We will also get to know the assistant chief apostle, Schlaphoff. So when people moved continents and countries, although their priority was to build a new life for themselves in their new homeland, they also enthusiastically testified about their faith. The first congregations in South Africa were established by Evangelist Klibbe, who had been sent here in 1889 from Australia. Just as an aside, although Karl Klibbe was sent from Australia, he was from German descent. So he began his work in Cape Town, but despite working very hard, he was not successful, and only after having moved to East London, he succeeded in establishing a congregation. The first congregations were formed among German immigrants. Since the divine services were conducted in German, the mother tongue of the immigrants, the congregations remained small. It was difficult to win people for God's work other than Germans. Around this time, in the year 1890, Wilhelm Schlaphoff immigrated to South Africa. Already in Germany, he had been in contact with the New Apostolic congregation. A year later, he once again came in contact with God's work in East London and was sealed with his family the following year by the Apostle Klibbe, who had been ordained as an apostle by letter in 1893. After receiving the deacon ministry and the commission to evangelize in Cape Town, he moved there in January 1903. Apostle Klibbe sealed the first souls in Cape Town a year later. The first church was constructed in Claremont, Cape Town in 1906. In addition to German, Wilhelm Schlaphoff, who had since been ordained a priest, soon also conducted divine services in English and Afrikaans. Only after the divine services were conducted in the language of the particular country, the congregations grew and new ones could be established. This caused a significant shift in the growth of the church all over the world. In September 1913, Wilhelm Schlaphoff, who had the ministry of bishop, was ordained apostle during a stay in Germany. In the same year, Apostle Klibbe had separated himself from the chief apostle and left the New Apostolic Church. Apostle Wilhelm Schlaphoff looked after the congregations in South Africa. The district continued to develop with great blessing. Through the work of other ministers, congregations were established in Johannesburg in 1910 and Pretoria in 1912, as well as in several other cities. Apostle Schlaphoff died in 1928 at the age of 61. By that time, there were 39 congregations and about 7,000 children of God in South Africa. Let's have a look at the life of the assistant chief apostle Heinrich Franz Schlaphoff. He is the son of the apostle Wilhelm Schlaphoff, and in the same year that his father passed away, on the 5th of December 1928, he received the apostle ministry by letter. Under his leadership, God's work grew to neighboring countries like Zimbabwe and Malawi as well. A year later, he was also entrusted with the district of South America. In 1930, he visited Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. He saw to it that divine services are held in the language of the country where possible. We have heard earlier how important the language issue was in terms of the growth of the church. When the Second World War broke out, the assistant chief apostle Schlaphoff looked after all congregations outside Europe. So that would be Africa, North and South America, Asia, and Australia. The chief apostle at that time, Chief Apostle Bischoff, was obviously in Germany then. After the war, Heinrich Schlapphoff remained responsible for the Southern Hemisphere area. From 1952, he worked as a district apostle in South Africa and retired in 1954. Today we learned about the origins of the New Apostolic Church in South Africa. It is important to know how our church developed in our own country. We learned that first evangelist Karl Klibber, and together with Wilhelm Schlapphoff, both of German descent, started the work of God, first in East London and thereafter in Cape Town. Initially, services were conducted in German, but once services were conducted in English and Afrikaans, the work of God spread to other parts of the country. Apostle Heinrich Schlapphoff became the assistant chief apostle and worked mostly in countries in the Southern Hemisphere, and after 1952 as a district apostle in South Africa. Today we have learned how the work developed in South Africa. However, in your workbook, there is additional information on how the New Apostolic Church developed in Australia and South America. Goodbye.